Welcome, everybody. I'm here today with Amy Yang, a CSP graduate of 2017, and she's sharing with us some of her thoughts and insights for you as a graduate student and moving into this new professional role that you are.
Awesome. Thanks, Jill. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Amy, share with us a little bit about your experiences and developing a strong relationship with your supervisor. And some of those things you might have learned through your assistantship supervisor relationship, and some of them even now. I mean, you're working professional, you're working in student affairs, you have another supervisor, you might have had several supervisors by this time. So anything that you have to share about in general about developing those really strong relationships with supervisors.
Yeah, absolutely. So my graduate assistantship was with the Career Development Center, and then my supervisor was Michelle Howe, an amazing human being and a gem. And I think I was really fortunate actually because Michelle also graduated from the CSP program. And what's really ironic too, now that I'm thinking about it, in my current position, my supervisor, Andrea Lowe, also graduated from the CSP program. So yeah, this is really, this is great now that I'm full circle thinking about it. Um, Anyhow, I think going back to the supervision piece or supervisor supervisee relationship, what was really special for me was I think those two supervisors specifically, they really try to get to know me as a person first. And so I remember when I was with CSP and with Michelle and the Career Development Center, during like the first week of training, the first couple of days were mainly about getting to know each other. Like where are we from? Are we from Wisconsin, outside of Wisconsin or Illinois? So we talked a lot about that, and we just really got to know just the team in general. And I think that really helped build the relationship early on, rather than just going straight to business and to say, this is your responsibilities, this is what you need to do. So I definitely appreciated that. And I would also echo that with my current position as well, is really relationship focused first, and then also additional training that might be needed for the role that I'm currently in, which is a career development, career and internship specialist for technology and data within the College of Letters and Science at UW-Madison. So that's the first piece. And I think with my supervisors, they also did a really awesome job. I think after getting to know each other, kind of easing in the responsibilities and roles that I would have in the office. And that a lot of that meant, I think getting exposure to FERPA, how does that play a role with career services, the student population that we will be serving. So I think pieces of that. And then also at one point having conversations about what type of experience do you want out of the graduate assistantship. And so Michelle and I definitely had a lot of conversations about how that would look like. And I think it was really helpful that she had, I think it was either weekly or bi-weekly check-ins, just with us as the graduate assistants, graduate interns, to kind of talk through how our class is going. I think kind of connecting the theories that we were learning in class into how does that look like in the Career Development Center as we support students. And then again, as I said before, I think connecting back to how is the experience, my experience as a graduate assistantship or graduate intern doing. How is that going? The positive feedback, and I think also feedback to give to Michelle of changes that could potentially be made if I weren't getting the experience I was getting.
Oh, that's really great. That's nice to get a sense of what that relationship could be like, for sure. Now, some of our, and I like how you're talking about some things that you all had in common and kind of investing and spending the time investing in each other. So it sounds like that's a pretty key part of developing relationships, is the investment of time and the willingness to share your actual feelings and thoughts. Does that sound right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I would say yes to all of that. And I think the relationship piece is really key, at least for my experience, because it also helped me not only get to know my supervisor, but this was very, and speaking for the Career Development Center for my graduate assistantship, I also got to know the other folks who were a part of the team in the Career Development Center. So this means um, the the other graduate assistants. And so in this case, I remember it was Danielle and then also Katie, which was really great. And then also Marty, who was the director. So yeah, I think if all of that wasn't incorporated in, I mean, I think eventually we'll probably get to know each other too, but I think the earlier beginning during the trainings where we just got to know each other, it wasn't necessarily work related, that really helped with the relationship.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So it seems like that is definitely applicable, even if somebody's supervisor isn't a CSP grad and they don't have that in common, that it's that time spent developing the relationship that's really key.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
What are some of your thoughts about what you like now that you've graduated and you've done your full-time, you're in your full-time position, you might have seen other people join your staff or other people being hired at UW-Madison, um, uh, and be in a situation where you can kind of observe and witness things.
Mhm.
What in your experience, what's on a supervisor's mind as they think about bringing a new staff member on board? What are they nervous about? What do they hope for? What's kind of on their mind as they start preparing for bringing a new staff member on board?
Mhm. I think that's a really awesome question, Joe, and it's really relevant too because in my current position in my office, we recently had a conversation about onboarding new staff because we're hiring three or four roles. So yeah, we recently had a conversation about this as a whole team, and I think some of the things that come up that I think relates to the question that you've asked is I think making sure that we're able to onboard or have these new staff feel welcome to the space. And so I think that's definitely a concern that the supervisors, I would say, or at least my supervisor, we're hiring for another advisor on our team. And I think that's something that we've talked about as an advising team, especially because now it's not going to be in person. We're going to actually be remote for the fall semester. And so how is that transition going to, I think, impact the new folks who are coming in, their experience? Because training is going to be online, meeting new staff like each other, even like in the interview process too, everything's going to be online. And so I think our team and my supervisor has that's been a potential concern that we've been talking through, because we want to make sure that whoever we interview and whoever we bring to be a part of our new staff will feel welcomed, and will provide like inclusive and welcoming environment overall. So I think that's one piece of it. Trying to think of other things going along with the online training, everything being online, regardless of our online or when we were still in person. I would say another concern, or I think just consideration that my supervisor or supervisors in general will probably think about is getting along with like that new person getting along with the whole team, or like I guess in my case I keep saying different teams because within my office we have the employee relations team, we have the advising team, we have the marketing team and strategic initiative and operations team, but we all work pretty closely together too. But I think with that in mind, I think just making sure, I think there will be concern of how is this person going to work with each of the teams, are getting along, and if there are challenges, how to kind of navigate around those challenges would probably be another concern that the supervisors would have.
Yeah, it seems like creating community, because I think no supervisor wants divisiveness
Right.
or or angst amongst the staff, um,
Mhm.
whether you're in person, but especially now when there's a lot of remote work happening,
Yeah.
that because that inhibits the team feeling and the community building and making sure everybody's moving in the same direction. So that makes a lot of sense, is making sure that you've got some gelling, and like how will things work within each of these teams. When you think about that, when you think about new people joining the team, and this is
Mhm.
whether you're a graduate assistant or a new staff member for a full-time position, are there things that you see that just drive existing staff members nuts when new people do this or do that? Like, what are some of the pitfalls that you see that are easily avoidable when a new staff member comes on board?
It's a great question. One of the thoughts that's coming to my mind, hopefully it's going to answer the question that you posed, is I think a lot of like the new staff that I've seen, oftentimes they worry about like, am I asking too much questions, and avoid asking questions, or always contemplate whether or not like they should or shouldn't ask questions. Where I feel like with my office, where we want to have open communication, so I don't know if it will necessarily drive, or it has necessarily drove my colleagues to go nuts. But I think when there's hesitation to ask questions, we always try to, as much as possible, say like, please ask your questions, because we would rather have these questions be asked rather than making an assumption that you should or shouldn't do X, Y, and Z, and then not do your job correctly. So probably more of that.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Yeah, rather ask the question, even if it's, if somebody's hesitant to ask questions all the time, like make a list. And when you get to 4 questions, then ask them all, if that makes the new staff member feel a little bit better, or feel like they're always interrupting somebody with the questions. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because I think that also instills confidence in the team. The team feels more confident that they know somebody is not out there just like assuming that they know something. Um,
Right.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. One of the other new things that as new staff members or as graduate assistants could use your help and your advice on is, how do you prepare for like one-on-one meetings with your supervisor? A lot of us come from situations where we've never really had one-on-one meetings with the supervisor. In your experience, how do you prepare for that? How do you get the most out of those meetings? Is it,
Mhm.
is it something that you should prepare for, or do you just go to them? What are your thoughts on that?
It's a great question. I felt like when I was in the CSP program, Michelle again just did a really phenomenal job of, I think, driving a lot of our conversations, because I think you're correct on, or at least in my experience, I was like, I didn't know what to expect for the one-on-one meetings. Like, I've never done it before, and everything was really new to me too. So Michelle really helped me brainstorm ideas, or just she had, I think, a plan in place, or just topics of what we could talk about in the one-on-one meeting. And then checking in on how my projects have been going on and that we've been working on. And so I think that really supported me. And then now, in currently my position, I would say I've learned a lot about, I think, just because of the nature of my role and with additional responsibilities that I've been given. I think my office, we use like a online tool called Basecamp, where my supervisor and I have like a folder, or I think a folder or a project within Basecamp, where we could put things that we would want to talk about in a one-on-one meeting. And I found that really helpful for me, at least so far. This could also depend on different personalities and like what you like, your preference. And for me, I would say I'm definitely a planner. And so I've always, whenever something just pops into my mind where I'm like, oh, this is something good that I can talk about with my supervisor, or this is a current project where I'm running into a challenge, I should probably talk to my supervisor or just gain some like feedback or insights from her, I would put that into the Basecamp folder. And then when we do actually have our one-on-one meeting, we'll go through all of that. So that's a little bit more, I think, on the tasky end. Another part that I think that would be important for the students within the CSP program as they're going through their graduate assistantship is also thinking about, what are some of the skills that I want to develop in my graduate assistantship. and I think potentially doing reflection on what skills do I actually have right now and what skills do I want to continue to develop, and potentially what skills are needed for maybe the functional area that I want to either specialize in or be a part of after the CSP program. And I think that could also be built into a conversation with the supervisors. And I mean, this could be early on or throughout like the whole semester. I could envision this, just so that you're able to check in with your supervisor, skills that you're developing and maybe skills that you want to continue to develop and how that's going to work or look like in your graduate assistantship.
Those are really good tips. And one thing that I'm really pulling from what you said is like to maybe not always be in receivership mode, that you're proactively helping develop the one-on-one agenda, and that you're talking about what skills you want to develop, and maybe even coming with ideas of how you could develop those within your office, so that you're being more in a proactive role rather than just in the receiving role. Obviously that changes throughout. At the beginning, that's a little bit more challenging, but you know, as you go through the 2 years of being in graduate school and now as a full-time professional, like really moving into that kind of taking charge of your destiny, taking charge of some of those things, and being a collaborator with your supervisor.
Absolutely. I think, yes, you summed it up really well, Joe. And I definitely agree. Because I think yes, there's a balance of receiving, but then also making sure the other balance, which is that you're advocating for yourself. And I think CSP during graduate school time is a really good time just to reflect about some of the skills that you want to gain, and how to gain those skills is definitely a huge part of it. Is up to the individual to think about how they will gain those experiences and skills. I mean, along with the support of the community too, but I think it does have to do a lot with the individual piece.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me, for sure. Yeah. You know, another one of the things that I wanted to kind of circle back to is that you talked about like bringing in 3 new staff members into your team, and preparing for that in conversations that you have had as a whole group. And so this, I think, is equally as applicable to a graduate assistantship and in a full-time work situation, as a student affairs professionals. How do you, what tips do you have, and how have you seen people join in to a existing office and creating ties and bonds and relationship and a team culture with colleagues? Because you know, sometimes it's not just about your supervisor, or your supervisor's life is a little bit easier if the colleagues are all like syncing up and it works really well and it's gelling really well. What tips do you have for people to start creating those relationships with colleagues, whether it's a co-grad or you know, the office manager or a fellow advisor?
Great question. I think one of the things that I've seen that has been really helpful, and also for myself in my own experience, as when I first transitioned back to UW-Madison to work at UW-Madison, was I think just talking to my colleagues and the people who are part of my team. And this could be as simple as, I think, during lunchtime, if you bring your lunch, or if if you, like in my office, we have like a kitchen area. And so it's also cubicle land, kitchen area, and then there's offices, and like we call them also chat rooms. And so I think the environment, we would pass like the kitchen in order to go to like the restroom area. And if there are people there, I think taking time just to get to know each other, while I think the environment plays like a role too, I think as long as you take the initiative to be willing to connect with your team or connect with colleagues that are part of the office, I think that is a good start to get to know each other. And that also builds a relationship where it's not just going to be work related, because in those small talk conversations, whether it's small or big, during lunch or just during passing periods, I've really gotten a chance to know my colleagues in the office, where more about like their family or their kids, Also, like what are their hobbies? All of those conversations, I think, happen at those small instances. Like for example, I wouldn't know that like Dwayne, who's a part of the employee relations team, and he's also sits across of my cubicle. I wouldn't have known that he likes to run outside unless if I didn't talk to him. And then I also had that like similarity where I'm like, that's great, Dwayne. I also really like running these days too. And then we'll talk about running, which is outside of like I like the work that we actually do, which is serving students. And so I think that has been really helpful. I know our office also, we have a fun committee, which I'm also part of the fun committee. It wasn't like when we were in the office, there wasn't like an official committee for it. There were a few of us who would provide ideas. And so we had like food bake-off, so competition of like cookie bake-off. We had like best homemade recipes that were theme based. We did it once like a month or so throughout like the whole school year. And that was always really cool because again, I don't know, there's something about food that just bring people together. And when people are together, that's where we can have conversations again that are not always about like work. So that's been helpful. And then with like the virtual platform, I think we've even made even more effort to make sure that while we're supporting students and working hard to make sure we're achieving our goals, and providing the best services for the students within a virtual platform, we've also wanted to make sure that we appreciate one another and show appreciation, and at the same time also still have fun. And so I know that we recently created a appreciation sort of like survey to ask staff, like, how do you want to be appreciated? Because some folks want, like, they just want verbal appreciation. Others maybe want like quality time where they'll meet with folks like in a virtual meeting like this just to talk about how life is going. And so that I think has been pretty helpful. And then we made sure the fun committee created like a day where we would do online games where there's a couple of us in the office who are pretty creative. I know I love playing games too, and I do a lot of games with my family whenever we do like family reunions, and there's always like a famous Jeopardy game that I create with my family, and so I actually implemented it to be a part of the online games for our office, and that was a really, really fun. Aside from, I would say, online games, we also folks just want to chat, and so we have like a happy hour like at the end of the day. That's just like an hour, like 4 o'clock until 5, whoever can stay and come and just chat about how work is going and like outside of work. And yeah, so I think all of that, these small efforts have been really helpful to continue to build our relationships. And hopefully when like we got virtual, we also hired a person, like a new staff, and that new staff was thankfully able to see our office when she came into the interview. But then all of the pandemic thing went down, and then we had to work virtually, and she's been working virtually since. And so my hope is that like all of these small built-in activities have been helping her feel more welcomed and getting to know staff, because I know in like a virtual environment, sometimes it might be hard to actually, we can't physically meet each other. And so we would have to build in meeting times into our calendars to actually chat with one another.
Yeah, you're not running into each other in the kitchen or the break room anymore. Yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely. Yeah. Gosh, games, food, and a happy hour, sign me up. I'm coming to your office too.
Yes, please join us.
Oh my gosh, that sounds awesome. This is just really such good advice that you're sharing with us. I love this. Another area that I want to pick your brain about a little bit is, as a graduate assistant, you play this dual role between being a student and being a staff member. And, it's sometimes that can get a little bit complicated, just in the way of you want to be showing initiative and kind of showing your value and your worth of being part of the team. And at the same time, like being collaborative and consultative with your supervisor, because as a graduate student, you're there for 2 years, like you don't know everything that's happened beforehand or why something's done a certain way. And do you have any tips or advice for balancing initiative with consultation in the work that you do?
I think that's a great question. I would say, I think as you get to like build a relationship with your supervisor, I think it'll also be important to understand like the history or the background of like why maybe some programs are done the way they're done, or why maybe things are the way how they are, to get that sort of like background information first. And then as you continue to, I think, build your experiences within your graduate assistantship, and as you work with the students and you serve the students and gain more of like that direct experience, I think I could probably envision like maybe at like midpoint during the semester, or I mean it could also be earlier too. Depends on like on the situation and your supervisor and you having a conversation about ideas that you might have, and then also asking your supervisor like you want to take initiative on X, Y, and Z, and getting their own perspective of like how that might play a role in like the current situation, to sort of like find a common ground. Or at least I would say, and when I've done that in like my graduate assistantship and like my current role now too, I think that I have found that to be pretty helpful. Just because I think in the beginning there's like the relationship that you have to build, and then also the trust that has to be built as well. Because I mean, I could also envision where some supervisors, this hasn't happened to me, but I could also envision where if I think it's great to like have ideas and say we need to make changes X, Y, and Z, but a supervisor could also have like the thought like, oh, like does this, they might not know the background of like why we're doing this, how we're doing it. So I think buy-in might be harder to get if you if you're really proactive during the beginning. So I think not necessarily saying that it's wrong to be proactive in the beginning, but I think just making sure that there's communication between you and your supervisor to find that common ground so that you will get buy-in.
That makes a lot of sense, that buy-in and building the trust and asking questions right from the get-go. That makes a lot of sense. And it sounds like it would also be a much less frustrating experience than kind of planning something out and getting really excited about it yourself and then feeling like, oh, now like that, then your supervisor is sharing like very specific parameters for it. And that might feel like a roadblock, whereas maybe that could have been resolved had you done like to share that and have those discussions at the beginning. And even maybe asking like, what are the very like, are there specific things that you absolutely want me or not want me to do in relation
Right.
to this project, or something that's like, you know, like that's this component of it is really important. Yeah. Yeah. Conversations. It's like a theme throughout all of this is like having those conversations, um,
Yeah.
and how critical those are, all along the way. Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, this has been super helpful, Amy. This is awesome. Do you have any general tips, not necessarily specifically about the supervisor relationship? If you do, that's perfect about that topic too, but just like general thoughts or wisdom that you want to share for with the CSP students as they think about their 2 years in the graduate program, they think about transitioning out of graduate school into their full-time position. Are there just like little kernels of wisdom that you've learned along the way that would be helpful for them to know as a professional?
Absolutely. Great question again. I will definitely say I think I think the CSP curriculum does a really good job with this already. And I would further push like just to encourage students to continue to think about what are your values, what are skills that you want to develop and potentially specialize in, and or maybe skills that you know that you need to work on. Continue to think about that, because I think that in the long run will really help you advocate for yourself, or I would say more so like market yourself to the employers that when you apply to positions. So I think that was really helpful for me when I was a graduate assistant or a graduate student. And I remember having a conversation with you, Jill, about like how my internship is going to look like for the summer, and then you really also helping walk through what are the skills that you actually want to develop. And then that I think provided a lot of clarity to help me make a decision on what I might want to focus on in terms of developing my experiences and skills. So I would definitely say that. And I would also say, I think, take time to just get to know people at Macomb at Western Illinois University, and more specifically, I would say the CSP program. Again, I think the program does a really great job with the cohort model, and so there's built-in opportunity to get to know your co-grads and like your cohort members, and I think definitely use that to your advantage. Just because I think graduate school was a time where it was a very painful experience in a good way because there was a lot of responsibilities. And for me specifically, it was the first time I was away from home for like a really like location wise. I've always been in Wisconsin and close to home. And so Illinois, considering that Macomb was a predominantly white institution, and on top of that too, it's in the middle of nowhere. It was a very unique experience for me, but I think overall, like the CSP family and like just the cohort model, I think that really helped me. Felt like I was able to be a part of, to be a part of this graduate school experience that I was going through, and to, I think, really persevere and fight through. So yeah, overall, I think just considering the whole experience, I think learn a lot, as you all will be going through and have been going through for the students who are returning to the CSP program, and get to know your colleagues, your cohort members, all the staff of CSP, because I think the community piece is going to be very helpful.
Yeah, the community is definitely at the heart of the CSP program. Yeah, that's definitely key for, yeah, I think for everybody's experience. And I think it's what keeps our faculty and our staff there too, is to be a part of it.
Absolutely. I always think about the question where I talk to my sister, like, if you were able to go back to like elementary school or high school, college, or graduate school, which one would you pick? And I'm like, I would not want to go back to any of those except my graduate program experience. And like, I am not saying that just because like you're here, Jill, but I think I really mean it, because I think graduate school was really one of the first times when I thought a little bit more about my identities and really critically think about why things are done the way they're done. And I think just with my own background and going through college, like if I had some opportunity to do that, but it wasn't as in-depth as the CSP program. And so very thankful for all of the courses that we had to go through, even though they were painful at times and hard to understand. But I think it really shaped me who to be who I am today, and also helped me, I think, even not outside of like the professional life, the personal life, of continue to question why things are done the way they're done, or helping family members and friends and like the community think about some of those questions too has been really I think important.
Yeah, that is a really good description of it. I like that. It kind of, to me, one thing that I see really consistently, and you're kind of underscoring this for me now, is it impacts the way that you think
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
and the way that you analyze everything from there on out.
Absolutely. I definitely agree. I always joke with my sister too, whenever we watch movies, I'm like, I just cannot, I think if I watched this like 10 years ago, I would have been like, oh, there's nothing wrong. But now, after going through all my experiences, and especially with, I think, the focus that we had in the CS program of like the diversity, equity, inclusion piece, and just identities and thinking critically, whenever I watch movies, Joe, I just can't watch them like without critiquing, like, oh, this is odd, this is like, we need to question this. Yeah, it's
Yep.
great.
Yeah, absolutely. CSP ruins TV and movies for you, pop culture. Absolutely. Well, Amy, as delightful as always to talk to you. You are a rock star. Thank you so much for sharing these tips and your wisdom and insights with all of the CSP students and people moving from student and going into their full-time position. You are awesome, and we very much appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jill. Thank you all too. I was really excited about this project, and thank you for give me a chance to share some of my insights from the graduate program all the way to my current position experiences now. So very exciting.
Awesome. Talk to you soon.
Yeah.